evening. It's a real pleasure to get to interview Doug. Just a quick introduction on Doug. Doug Beal has had a career in volleyball that has spanned more than 30 years as an athlete, coach, and administrator at the highest levels. His strategic thinking and innovative strategy to the game helped grow the sport to what it is today. From his numerous accomplishments in volleyball, some of the honors Doug has received include finalist for the FIVB Greatest Coach of the 20th Century, inducted into the International 2007 recipient of the Harold T. Freemood Award, and was inducted into the International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. Doug, like was mentioned, represented Maccabi USA on the Open Men's Volleyball team at the 8th Maccabi Games in 1969, taking home a bronze medal. It's my honor to welcome Doug to this evening's event.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate that. It's nice to be here. There's a wave to everybody. It's a little interesting to see all the faces here. I'll try to connect eyeball to eyeball with some of you.
Awesome. Well, I guess kind of start off at kind of the beginning and kind of hear how you first got involved and first got started in volleyball.
Yeah. So that was a while ago. So I'm a kid from Cleveland, Ohio. Not exactly the hotbed of volleyball in our country, but I was really fortunate to have a physical education teacher in elementary school who was involved in the sport. And, we were introduced to the sport. I loved it. I played some other sports, but back in those days, it wasn't even USA Volleyball. It was the United States Volleyball Association. And, there was no junior program. It was sort of open AAU kind of competition. Anyway, I started playing when I was 12, going to these tournaments. I think I scared my parents, and they kept asking, "What are you doing? Why are you going away and spending time with these adults?" Anyway, I love the sport, kept playing, went away to college, decided that volleyball was at least as important as my education, and got serious about it, and played at Ohio State. At that time, one of the few universities that had a varsity program, and there you go, on and on. So I got lucky. This gentleman that started me, honestly, in the 4th grade, and just a random, I think for me, stroke of good luck, and there you have it. That's the story.
Awesome. Do you have like a first experience where you combined your passion with volleyball with being a Jewish athlete? Oh, did we freeze for a quick second there? Let's see if he comes back.
There we go.
Yeah, sorry, I lost you for a minute.
No problem. So I was asking if you have an early experience where you got to combine both your passion for volleyball with being a Jewish athlete.
Yeah, I never honestly thought about that very much, Andrew. I finished college in 1969, which was the year that you referenced for the Maccabi Games. There were a fair number of Jewish athletes playing volleyball at that time, and I had an opportunity to get to know some of them. I'd gone to California, actually a couple of summers, 1967, 1968. Got to know some people that, I don't know, Alan Sherman's going to remember some of these names, maybe one or two of you, Harlan Cohen and Gene Selznick, Butch Friedman. I played with them. They were all Jewish volleyball players and really talented players. And so I knew about the Maccabi Games. I had trained with the national team. I'd gotten to a certain level in late 1968 and early 69. And so the Maccabi Games were coming up. Harlan Cohen was going to be the coach. He was our 1968 Mexico City women's Olympic coach, and the opportunity to To be coached by him was terrific. Going to Israel was terrific. I had just had my appendix out. I went out to California. We trained and went to Israel, and it was an interesting experience in many respects. And the first part of that experience was about a day after I got to Israel, I contracted dysentery. Not a terrible case, but wasn't the greatest way to start an international career. Recovered enough to play, and we had a pretty good team. And the quality of the competition, at least then, was pretty good. Israel was a good team. Brazil was a good team. Argentina was a good team. And we had a pretty good team. And it was a fabulous, looking back over the years, it was a fabulous experience for me. And it introduced me to international volleyball. It introduced me to travel. It introduced me to a lot of individuals that were national team level players and coaches and sort of the world of international volleyball. Most of the matches that we played in that Maccabi games were outside, and some were on pretty rough concrete. Some were at kibbutz. So it was an interesting introduction, but I don't know, I loved it. I loved being in Israel. 4 of us on the team, including the coach, Harlan, stayed after the games and toured for about 10 days. We had a great experience. Honestly, we went from one end of the country to the other. It was fantastic. We saw a lot of sights. We got ingrained in some of the history and culture, and it was I don't know, I wouldn't have traded that experience for any other way to start in international volleyball. And for me, it was really impactful and influential.
Going back to like the training in the U.S. before you guys traveled there, what was like the team selection like? Was there a tryout, or was it mostly formed by that head coach?
Yeah, the best term I could use is it was random. We did have some training in California, and the team was really uneven. We had some really, at the time, very good college age and a little bit older players, and we had some players that it's hard to explain how they were on the team, but wonderful people. And we had a couple of really interesting characters. So the experience was honestly was fantastic, and I've just I don't know, I've relived it a lot, and some of the uniqueness of it was pretty special and never to be duplicated, frankly. We had a Holocaust survivor on the team. We had some
Looks like we lost him again.
Yep.
Give him a minute.
Yep.
and a fantastic experience.
Was this also your first time traveling to Israel for these games, or had you been there previously?
No, first time to Israel, and I have only been back one other time, both 2.5 years ago. My son and daughter have both been interested in playing, and my son went over, and I accompanied him and was able to do a coaching seminar there. And a really good friend of mine is still there, who, again, some of you know, Ari Sellinger, who coached our U.S. women for quite a few years very successfully, as well as a number of other countries. And I got to spend some time with him, and he's really an iconic individual in our sport, and he's still coaching. And he's, I think he's early mid 80s and very successful. And it was really a wonderful time for me to revisit. And my gosh, how that country has changed. It's pretty staggering.
Is there a memory from the games that kind of sticks out in terms of, being in that match and winning a bronze medal? Is there a moment that you kind of keep revisiting about that experience?
You mean beyond the dysentery? So, I remember a match we played and a day that we spent at one of the kibbutz, and got to really visit with the people who were there. We had a wonderful crowd that night. We played under the lights in an outdoor stadium on concrete. I can't even remember who we played. I do remember we won the match, but the enthusiasm and the passion and the welcoming, it was really a wonderful day. And volleyball was only part of it in that match, but getting to spend time with the kids and getting to spend time with young adults of our age. So I was 22 at the time. That was a special day. And then, I remember visiting the digs at Masada. I remember being at the Dead Sea, a lot of the touristy kind of things, but traveling around, and it was a unique time for me and pretty special.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to hear about, especially now where they have the Israel Connect as a part of the programming before competition. Yeah. Hearing that you had, a similar experience, but on your own, and how that programming really, plays into the overall experience of being able to connect with, your playing experience, but also, being immersed in the Jewish culture while there. And also with the tradition of, community support in terms of locals coming out and watching the games and being, very involved. I think that's something that has carried on, right. Each and every games that we've seen, especially having played in different cities. With my two experiences, I heavily remember, how accepting the community was and how excited they were to have these sports within their communities. Kind of switching gears, I kind of wanted to hear about some of your experience on the national team as a player, and kind of how that selection process was, becoming a part of it and being on the team.
Yeah, the U.S. national team has evolved pretty dramatically, I think, over the years into a really structured world today, and very successful, both our men and women, and frankly our Paralympic teams as well. When I was a player, one of the big differences on our national team was that the team was reselected every year, and sort of started from zero. And so the fact that you had been on the team the summer before had probably a little bit of influence, but very little. And so there was, almost every year that I played, there was a selection process that occurred either out of the USVBA nationals at the time, and it was sort of transitioning to some collegiate level that was high enough where players were coming directly out of college. So a selection was made, a large group was identified. They were brought together for sometimes a very short training camp, sometimes a little bit longer training camp. And it was essentially a seasonal summer program. And one of the years I coached, we played 100 international matches in one of the years. In my career, I'm not sure, and I played for about 8 years on the national team, I'm not sure total we played 100 matches. Some years during the summer, depending on what the competition was, we might have played 5 or 6 matches and trained, I don't know, a week for every match we were going to play. So it's really changed dramatically. The coaches were reselected almost every year. So there was really no continuity during the late 60s and through the 70s until really the late 70s. So that's maybe the biggest change that's happened. So we have obviously national team programs now. Coaches are selected for a quad. There's a lot of continuity, a lot of stability, and therefore a lot more success.
Yeah. And, one thing that I've definitely experienced, being a collegiate athlete and then switching to the coaching side of it, how was that for you, going from a player 1 year and then assuming a coaching role the next year?
Honestly, that was crazy. That would never happen today. And it probably shouldn't have happened then. I think as the sport of volleyball has grown and evolved, the profession of coaching has also grown and evolved in a really, I think, spectacular way. The quality of coaching in this country is really second to none, certainly in volleyball. And I think that's had an enormous amount to do with the success our men's and women's teams have had internationally. And so that's different. When I started, my first coaching was really when I was working on a master's degree at Bowling Green. So I was 22 and a half, 23, and frankly, knew almost nothing about coaching. And most of my peers at the time were coaching because it was a vehicle to allow them to keep playing. And I wasn't much different, frankly, at the time. And so that's been an enormous evolution in a terrifically positive way, I think, for the sport in this country. The quality of coaching at the high school level, the club level, the growth of the club programs has just proven to be incredibly impactful for the coaching and for starting kids at an age for their development that just simply didn't happen 30 years ago or 40 years ago or whatever. And so, as I said, when I started playing, there was no such thing as junior age volleyball. If you didn't get grabbed along by your parents or some other adults, you didn't start playing until you were perhaps into your late teens or early 20s at the youngest. So big change.
Yeah. And can you give a little background of like the years leading up to the games in '84, where your team, ended up winning the gold medal in the Olympics, and kind of how that process was of building the team and the culture to be able to compete, and also some of the history that came along with those games?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, Andrew. We thought we had a pretty special group that actually started in maybe early '79, I would say, maybe '80. Really a group of incredibly talented athletes from half a dozen different schools in the country, and highly motivated, highly competitive. And so we just thought if we could put a program together and keep them together and train enough hours, and at that time, gosh, a year-round training was we were still evolving what that meant, and how do you do that? How many hours can you put in? How do you support it financially? What are the other criteria needed to really deal with the athlete in total, from a nutritional perspective, from a psychological perspective, from a physiological perspective, from a motor learning, by all of the sports science. And of course, we didn't know what we didn't know, and we learned a lot. But the foundation, I think, of the success in '84 and then on '88 and on was really that group of incredibly talented, motivated athletes, and they grew just in ways that are hard to measure. But I think I don't know. Some people know we went on a pretty radical team building exercise in the winter of 1983. We took them on a 3.5-week outward bound experience in the middle of winter in the canyon lands of Utah, because we had, at that time, volleyball was kind of split in our country between sort of a very concentrated group in Southern California, and then some sporadic pockets in the Midwest and other places in the East. And we had some really talented players in all of those areas. And to get those players who hardly ever interacted and hardly knew each other and it came from a different background, to get them to sort of see each other in a different way, we thought we needed to do this, what's called a significant life experience. And to do that, you kind of get them out of their comfort level, and certainly camping in the snow and carrying all your food and being out in the so-called wilderness was a different life experience, pretty significant. And we thought that was pretty impactful. And about the time we got back from that trip, and half a dozen players recovered from some minor frostbite and things like that, that we can joke about today, but wasn't all that funny back then. The team made some significant changes, and we asked them to do some things that were unusual at the time in how they played. And I don't think we would have had the acceptance or the willingness of the team to do those things without that outward bound experience. And we went on some pretty successful tournaments. And as I say, we played a lot of matches, which was kind of force feeding, catching up to countries around the world, mostly at that time in Eastern Europe, where they were essentially doing what almost all the countries are doing today, treating their national volleyball team as a professional entity. Everybody's doing that. We are, and we're pretty good at it too. So I think those were some important elements that allowed us to be successful. A trip that we took just before the games, about a month and a half or so, 2 months before the games, to the Soviet Union at the time, Russia today, playing a series of matches with the Russian team. At that time, they were certainly the gold medal favorite. During that trip, we played 5 matches with them. Right after the second match, the boycott was announced, but we won all the matches. I'm not sure that the last ones were as important to the Russians as the first couple, but we established that we're really good and we can play at that level. But it's different to play at home, to play at the Olympics. The U.S. men's team had not been to the Olympics, had not qualified for the Olympics since Mexico City in 1968. So we were looking at a pretty big chunk. And that's, other than the very first Olympics in 1964, we had a roster of 12 first-time Olympians. And I remember the very first match in Los Angeles playing Argentina, pretty good team that we were kind of concerned about as an opening match. 2 things stick out in my mind. One is I turned the wrong lineup in first set. Coaches get nervous too. And secondly, Steve Timmons was hyperventilating. We had to pull him out of the match because he was going to pass out. We literally put him on a paper bag to rebreathe on a paper bag, not because he wasn't playing well, but because we needed him to win the match. But it was, it was a pretty unique Olympics from a lot of perspectives. Sad about the boycott, but of course the U.S. had boycotted in '80, a number of Eastern Bloc countries in '84, and even in '88 there were a bunch of countries that boycotted that it's not talked about very much in Korea in '88. So that's kind of sad, and I think the politicization of the games is an unfortunate sidelight, but boy, those games were so well attended. Los Angeles is a stunningly good location for the games, and probably increasingly good because of the huge number of terrific venues and the passion of the population, et cetera. So there you go. I'm not sure I've answered all your questions. I touched on a few of them anyway.
So with your team being, not very experienced at the Olympic level, how big was, the home field advantage being in LA?
Pretty big, I think. We were able to, I think, have an experience where the players, I know we did a nice balance between allowing them to engage with their families and get lots of tickets for the families. And gosh, one of the consistent things that's happened with USA Volleyball over the various Olympics, but certainly started in '84, is the increasingly large number of fans who go to the Olympics to support the team. And it just kept carrying through in Korea in '88, in Barcelona in '92, and '96, et cetera. Whether we've been winning gold medals or other medals or in the medal round or not, I think in Rio we had almost 300 family and friends following the men's and women's indoor Olympic teams. It's pretty special, and it started in Los Angeles. And sort of the Olympic experience is something that's pretty unique about that tournament compared to any other international competition that you play in. And the World Championships is important, and the World Cup is important. And now there are a bunch of tournaments where the players have an opportunity to win a lot of prize money, and so those become important. But there is something really special and unique about the Olympics that appeals to athletes, and they really want to soak up that experience because for most of them, it might be the only time they're going to be at an Olympic Games. And finding the balance of wanting to be the best you can be and maximizing your opportunity to do well with the experience for you, maybe your spouse, maybe your parents, maybe extended family, is a really tough deal for the coaches and the staff. And I think we've come up with a pretty good balance that seems to have worked more often than not, but it's a tough one.
Yeah, and being at the 30-minute mark, I just kind of wanted to, touch base a little bit on your role with USA Volleyball being CEO in the past, and kind of where you are today in terms of still with the Olympic Committee, but in a completely different sport.
Yeah. So I tell this story occasionally. I thought I was an okay player. I got to be a fairly good player. I made the national team, so I could play. I thought I was a much better coach than a player. I had some success coaching. And I think, frankly, I was a better CEO than I was a coach or player. So I'm not sure what's next after being, I think I'm really good at being retired. But I got the opportunity to lead USA Volleyball. It was an incredible honor for me for 12 years. And I think I got kind of lucky again. I think I've had some luck in a lot of moments in my life. So I'm the CEO of USA Volleyball during some years of some pretty special growth for the sport, some of which I think we influenced, and some of which I think we just simply were in the right place at the right time and were able to take advantage of. But national governing bodies are pretty unique organizations, and I think in many respects, I think they try to balance three priorities that are very difficult and sometimes in conflict. And so you have to be very sensitive and responsive to the U.S. Olympic Committee, now the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. And they have lots of responsibilities you have to meet, lots of criteria that you have to be sure your athlete populations and your member organizations have to meet for safe sport, for drug testing, et cetera, for financial responsibility and the like. But so that's one priority and really important. The second one is you have to be responsible to your international federation. And so for volleyball, that's the FIVB, International Volleyball Federation in Lausanne. And really for them, the priority is, do you have a good national team? Can you host big events successfully, hopefully financially successfully? Can you maybe connect to television markets and sponsor opportunities for the sport from a financial point of view? So you have that's sort of the second leg of the organization. And the third is you're this national sport organization. And in the case of volleyball, we have 40 regions. We have about 420,000 individual members, maybe 7,000 or 8,000 junior clubs, and you have to be sensitive to their needs. And in some respects, they could care less about the national team. They could care less about drug testing. They could care less about all the financial responsibilities you have. They're just interested in opportunities to play. And so trying to balance all those was, I think, the biggest challenge for me as a CEO, but really interesting and really a challenge in a very good way, and trying to blend that. I think we did a pretty good job. You know, we grew some programs that I'm really proud of, particularly on the beach side and on the sitting discipline side. We won lots of medals. We grew the program from almost every perspective. We had a wonderful high performance program developed. I think we took care of our national teams at a level pretty special in the NGB world. And it was just a wonderful experience for me. And I'm clearly, I've spent a lot of my life embedded in the Olympic movement, in the international sport world, and I'm passionate about that. I'm passionate, I think, about good governance and safe sport for athletes and clean sport for athletes, and the value of sport broadly for our population, for any number of health-related and psychosocial benefits.
Awesome. Doug, I want to take a quick little break here and let Alan have a moment to talk to the group, and then also just keep putting questions in if you'd like questions answered, and then afterwards we'll come back and do a Q&A.
Great.
I'm unmuted. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. I was excited to get the email that Doug was going to be on, but I'll just digress for 1 second, because Doug doesn't know this. I don't think anyone knows it, other than the only other person that I see online that could possibly know this would be Fred Schoenfeld. But I got my start playing volleyball in the 60s. I was playing volleyball for the Jewish Community Center and in Greater Washington, and then not at your level though. But anyway, 1972, we went to Chicago at a tournament by JWB. JWB, for those that you don't know what that means, was the Jewish Welfare Board. That was a precursor to the Jewish Community Centers Association, JCCA. It was called JWB then. So we were at this tournament, and I don't know how we came in, it doesn't matter. But at the dinner, they said, we have to have a place to host the next tournament in 1973, Memorial Day. So I looked around to the guys then, and I said, we can do it in Washington. And since I was the chairman of the Health and Phys Ed Committee, I knew that I could get it done. So I put my hand up, and that was probably the biggest mistake I ever made in my life. But at any rate, in 1973, Washington hosted the JWB tournament. At that time, the volleyball team for the Maccabi games was selected by the winning team of the tournament, with the addition of maybe 1 or 2 other players. So after that tournament, and there was a man that ran volleyball in this country, Doug may know his name, Harold Zimmerman. I don't know if you know the name, Doug.
Very, very well. I knew Harold very well.
Okay. He was my mentor. And so after the tournament was over, he came up to me and says, Alan, you got to get involved in the Maccabi games or whatever. I said, okay. So then all of a sudden I became the chairman, sports chairman for the 77 games from 73 to 77. Okay. But that's how I got started in Maccabi USA, well, then U.S. Community Sports for Israel. But it was through volleyball. So there is a connection being with you tonight and volleyball. So it's a great story. Anyway, in July of 18th of 2001, during the 16th Maccabi Games, the International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame held its quadrennial induction ceremonies. We do this every 4 years during the Maccabi Games. And in 2001, Doug was elected to the International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, Doug wasn't able to attend the ceremony. So 19 years later, I am very happy to be able to show you his medal, that from his induction medal, the International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame induction medal, and the certificate, which I will be sending to him when I get his home address. So I'm sorry that it took 19 years to do this, but as they say, better late than never. And I hope you'll treasure the medal and your certificate.
I will.
Happy to have you in the Hall of Fame.
Alan, thank you. It's very nice. I appreciate that very much. And I'm sorry I wasn't able to be there at that time, but this is a wonderful way to get that award. Thank you. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Okay.
Thank you, Alan. So a couple of questions have come in the chat that I think would be a great opportunity to ask. One of the first questions is, Doug, you had originally volunteered to coach in '89 for the Maccabi team, but couldn't do it after taking a new job. Do you ever consider coaching the team again? Not too late?
I thought I was really retired for about the last 3 years. I would never say no. I've had the opportunity to coach 3 or 4 times, and it just hasn't worked out schedule-wise. Either I was coaching the U.S. team or CEO or something, and that's been unfortunate. And as I said, I was back in Israel 2.5 years ago with my son, and had a terrific experience, and got to spend time with the full staff of the Israeli Volleyball Federation, doing some consulting and talking. We had a great day and a half together, and did the seminar. So I would never rule it out. Let's see. The last coaching I did was I ran a high school camp for my daughter's high school team last summer. So I don't know. You never say never.
And going off of that, how are your kids? Are they involved in volleyball as a sport?
They are, stunningly. Yeah, both of them are hoping, like lots of people, to be able to get to jobs that they are starting. They're both going to be interns or volunteer assistants. My daughter at the University of Mississippi in Oxford, and my son at Creighton in Omaha. So they're hoping to start end of the month or early in July. And for some strange reason, they think they want to coach volleyball.
Nice. Staying in the collegiate realm, Russ Rose, also a Maccabi USA alum, had about 41 seasons, I would say, and
Yeah.
7 national titles as a head coach. Arguably coaching some of the best players, but the best women athletes in the U.S. What do you think is Coach Russ's secret to his success, and what does he bring to the Penn State program that other coaches, other Division I volleyball programs are missing?
That's an odd question. Gosh, so many things. I've known Russ longer than his 41 years at Penn State or whatever. He's a fabulous coach, and he's traveled. When I coached the U.S. team, he traveled with us at least once, if not more. And he's a joy to be around. He has a refreshing approach to the game. I think he understands the game at a incredibly sophisticated level. I think he's just, one of the really iconic, successful coaches in our country, and frankly, in the world. So what's the secret? His personality, his intuitiveness, his interaction with players. And there's a great quote, you should be yourself because everybody else is taken. Don't try to be somebody else. he does that as well as anybody. I think he coaches like Russ Rose and has had just incredible success. So that's, I don't know, that's the best I can define it.
And overall, like, where do you see growth in our sport, coming forward? Beach seems to be getting more popular with the AVP and some of the sponsorships that they've now locked in, like Amazon Prime for all their streaming. But, indoor has lagged behind in popularity, especially here in the US, at least at the pro level. Where do you kind of see some of the next growth coming?
First of all, I think volleyball is perhaps the healthiest or one of the healthiest sports in this country. By almost any metric. I guess we want to talk about it outside of this current pandemic. Who knows what's really going to happen? But volleyball is the #1 participant sport at the high school level and the collegiate level for women. The growth for men collegiately is equal to or better than any other sport. I think at the high school level, actually, boys high school volleyball is growing faster than any other boys sport. The number of new colleges that are playing varsity volleyball, particularly at the Division III level, but also Division II, and even a few new ads at the Division I level. The First Point Foundation has done some remarkable things to in a terrible environment right now to grow volleyball, to grow men's volleyball. The beach, as you mentioned, seems really stable, which is great for the AVP. It's gone through maybe 6 or 7 additions, and this current one with Donald's son as the principal owner is really stable. I think there are 5 maybe or 6 initiatives right now to try to establish a professional league. And I think, frankly, it's an odd time for that given the pandemic, but they all started previous to that. I think there's a reasonable chance right now. I think the sport has solidified and has moved beyond this sort of participant-only perception of the sport to being a much more spectator-oriented, commercially viable sport. That there is a professional side to it now. I've said to people many times the 2 things that I think are very possible today and will change the paradigm shift or make a paradigm shift in the sport are viable, sustainable professional leagues and the addition of some indeterminate number of fully funded men's collegiate programs. And I think we have really, I keep using the word viable efforts at both of those going on right now that we haven't had previously. And so I'm enormously upbeat about the sport. Sadly, this moment is putting a sort of a slowdown on all kinds of sports. I think everybody's trying to figure out how we navigate this world and get back to something, we say air quotes, approaching normal. But I think volleyball is maybe going to be the sport of the next 20 or 30 years. I'm really pretty bullish about the future of this sport. I think USA Volleyball is in a fantastic position that it hasn't been in previously, financially and programmatically, and the regions are strong. Again, the pandemic, changes things a lot, but we're going to recover from that. We're going to move forward. We're going to have a vaccine. We're going to be able to get back to something approaching where we were, and hopefully we'll be smarter and a better world and a better culture and a better society for that. So I'm pretty upbeat.
And we have time for one more question. And, I think it's a really important one about diversity in our sport, especially touching on the current events, surrounding, the recent things that have happened around George Floyd. And, what can we do as Jewish athletes to help aid, in diversity and with our sport? Kind of wondering what your take would be on that.
Yeah, that's such a challenging issue right now. Volleyball has certainly not been nearly as diverse as we would like to see it. And what is really wonderful on one side, which is all these junior clubs which operate outside of our educational system, but also tend to cost a lot of money, sort of mandate this lack of diversity. So I'm also engaged with the Starlings program, and maybe some of you know about Starlings, certainly some of you do. So this is a program that started targeting just women's programs, girls, but is now morphing into boys and girls in underserved populations, in underserved locations, and again is so much bigger now than it was 5 years ago. So progress is being made, and what I'd like to see USA Volleyball do, and it's hard for me to point a finger because I didn't do nearly as much as I should have when I was CEO and had some more authority there. But I think we need to invest more. We need to create opportunities. We need to really reach out with programs that are targeted for the most diverse population, and we have those available, and there is interest. There is a way to do that, and sport is a fabulous vehicle for social justice, for seeing people in a way that changes your perceptions and maybe deals with biases, and just makes for an opportunity for people to interact in ways that they might not ordinarily if they're not engaged in something like sport. And so I'm optimistic. I think work that's going on with First Point to fund historically Black colleges for varsity programs, for work that's going on with Starlings to start boys and girls programs in inner cities, with African American populations, with Latino populations, with Native American populations, is we just have to spend more of our resources and more of our effort in those directions. And I'm really optimistic that we can do that and will be doing it.
And just to wrap up our conversation, how is it now being the chairman of USA Surfing, and how has that shift, taken place?
Oh boy. So one of the things I got interested in during my years as CEO at USA Volleyball was governance, good governance. And if you follow international sport and you follow the behavior of international federations and frankly the IOC itself, in many respects they're models of terrible governance, and in some respects outright corruption. It's just a sad world, and money tends to drive behavior that way sometimes, and power and staying in power, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so there are some new NGBs. Surfing happens to be one of them. The sport is going to debut in Tokyo, we hope. We have some great athletes in the sport, some of the athletes at the top of the world. I've certainly made lots of friends over the years that are at the USOPC. So a couple of them came to me 5 or 6 months ago and said, how about doing some advising, consulting, whatever. And I was happy to do it. I happen to have my wife's family in headquartered or sort of concentrated in San Clemente. That happens to be where USA Surfing is located. Until the pandemic, we were going out there on a somewhat regular basis. It well worked out. And anyway, so I got involved, and one thing led to another, and here I am as chair of the board. and it takes some time. So I'm no longer be able to tell people that I'm fully retired. I'm just quasi-retired now. But the people are terrific. They're passionate about it. As I say, we have some great performers. I think the direction of the IOC and the Olympics broadly, and NBC, and people that really influence the direction of things is toward these kind of action sports and that appeal to maybe a little bit younger age demographic. So it's kind of interesting for me, and I'm trying to balance how many activities I'm involved with in volleyball, because I can't really give that up, and I don't want to give it up, and I'm trying to figure out how I get more hours in the day. That's a tough one, but surfing's fun, and I think in Paris, surfing's going to be in Tahiti or something, so that'd be okay to stay and maybe get a trip there. Who knows? Something like that.
Doug, those are all of my questions here on my end. I want to just say thank you so much for taking the time this evening to connect with all of us. Again, thank you to Maccabi for hosting this event, and for Steve putting it together. But thank you, Doug. Thank you, everybody, for joining and listening in tonight.
Yeah.
Hope everybody continues to stay safe, and thanks again for joining.
My pleasure.
Yes,
Thanks for
definitely.
everybody.
Thank you, Andrew, and especially Doug. Thank you so much for your time tonight. And before we wrap up, I just want to let everybody know the next Maccabi games are in the summer of 2022. And if anybody is interested in getting involved on the volleyball side as either a coach or a chairman, there are still some opportunities left. So please contact Maccabi USA office for some more information. And please continue on the lookout for additional Maccabi at home sessions. Next week's events include our next book club featuring Palestine Posts by Daniel Chertoff. The author will be joining us live on Monday afternoon from Israel. And Tuesday evening is our next sports show with Bruce Pearl, the head men's basketball coach at Auburn University. So thank you, Doug. This was an amazing event and truly honored to have you on. And Andrew, thank you so much for joining us as the moderator.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks to everybody who joined. My pleasure.